Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wild Woman podcast. I have Rebekah Donnelly here with me today, and Rebekah has, I believe, a very interesting story, as everyone does. But one of the topics that she's going to talk about is plant medicine. And she has been running retreats and been through her own experiences with plant medicine in the last 8 years. But she has a story, like all of us, that brought her to that place. So or Rebecca's also going to talk about that as well. I think it's just before we came on, and even before we hit record, and before I started talking to Rebecca, I had this really powerful image of Russian dolls, and how you take off one Russian doll and the next. And for me, on my own, I suppose, journey of healing and growing, I have this sense of layers and layers and layers of what I'm not, but also things I've carried are being cleared. And the more that we do, the more the power of our ancestors can flow through us. That's how I've been feeling it very much. And I just sort of think it's very interesting going into this conversation that image just came so strongly to me when I sat down for a few moments. So, firstly, Rebecca, welcome. I'm very grateful you're joining me from France. And she says she's
Thank
just
you.
in the door. So, thank you for taking the time out
I
this
could be
evening.
anywhere at any
You
moment.
could. Sounds like it. Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you.
And really, what I'd love as well, many questions pop up. And I think what's really interesting is, and I found it with other guests, just to get a sense of the trajectory of someone's life. We all have ups and downs and we all have challenges. And it's just, I think, very powerful to be able to see how someone maybe has navigated their own challenge and where it has brought them to and the gifts they have to share. So, would you mind just starting off by just giving a little bit of a backstory to your life and what has led you to what you do now? It's going to be a big
Oh,
question, but
yeah, I was going to say this could take the whole podcast.
I know some key
um,
moments, and then we'll
so
go from there.
I was born in England, and um, I don't know I was the
Um,
youngest of five children. Um,
I tell you what struck me, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but
yeah,
just first thing, when you said, because this is something that I'm not familiar with, when you said the words in what you shared with me about being born into a devout Mormon family, that I know nothing really about being a Mormon, but I imagine because our childhood experiences greatly shape us. That's been my
yes,
experience. So how did that sort of play? And I'm sure that had a formative, those formative
yeah. I
years.
mean, it was like very very strict, so there were
Mm,
lots and lots of rules. And I think probably the first thing I really felt about it or noticed about me and others that weren't Mormons is that I was different. So it was like I had this complete already an idea that I was different to anybody else and I didn't fit in. My parents didn't drink tea or coffee. Like in England, you don't drink. And like, every place you go, do you want a cup of tea? No, we don't drink because we're Mormon and because, it's against our religion and all this. And they made a big deal out of it all the time. And I was always like, oh my God, why can't they just say, no, I'll have a glass of water, But they were so proud of it. Like a lot of thing about them, maybe anybody with any beliefs, they want to share what they believe to be true. So they were passionate about it. But like, it's a very family orientated religion. Like so it takes up your whole life. You've got church on Sunday. That's like 3-4 hours on a Sunday. Monday is called family home evening. You have to all be doing stuff as a family on a Monday. Tuesday is you do, teenagers go into church to do a thing in the evening. Wednesday, it's the women go, you know, it's like, it's like filling up your life and kind of like keeps this social circle very small. Well, very small when you're living in England when there's not a high population of Mormons, you know, there were quite a few, but we were quite spread out. So anyway, it was just like the main thing really for me when I was young was about the fact that I was different. Now, as I got a bit older and more involved with the gospel of the religion, then I started questioning it. But when I was young, it was just like, oh, so we're different, you know, to others. And I didn't like that. You know, I definitely didn't like, I felt like I didn't fit into all the others because all their mums and dads smoked and drank tea and coffee and, you know, hung out and went to the pub, like, you know, so I'd never been in a pub, never had any of that culture that's like actually a big part of British culture. Not saying
And
whether
Irish.
that's good or bad, but
No.
the fact, you know, but I wasn't part of it and I didn't know what went on. I didn't know anything about that life. And then when I was about 10 years old, we moved to Saudi Arabia. So my dad had been working there for a year. We actually went, when I say we, my older brothers had kind of left home or gone to college at this point. So it was actually just my parents and my sister and myself. She's only 2 years older than me. So, so basically, yeah, we ended up moving to Saudi Arabia just as I was kind of getting into secondary school and trying to, like, you know, figure out who I was and make my friends and all that. And so that was, you know, a very massive change. I'd never even heard of Saudi Arabia, so most people hadn't back then, and didn't know about, you know, Muslims, didn't know about different culture, didn't know anything, you know. And this was in 1979. So the Taliban was, you know, the religious police were on the streets with the sticks, like that's all gone now. But back then it was like, you know, if you showed like, you know, anything above there as like t-shirt, if you had a short sleeve t-shirt, they would come and hit you with a stick. No matter how old you were. And, you know, it kind of like sexualized young girls because we had to cover up. So then we had to become really self-aware and body aware at a young age. So that was one of the many
And almost shameful, I
effects that it
imagine, as well.
had. And yes, yeah. And so like the thing about it was the area where we lived, like a lot of people have had wonderful experiences there, right? And I'm not saying I didn't have a lot. I did have a lot of, let's say, privileges. You know, I traveled around the world and saw a lot of the world during my younger years. But what was happening in Saudi Arabia at the time, where my dad was working, it was a 30-year project where they were taking the desert on the edge of the sea and turning it into an industrial city. So it was a massive project, and they decided they were in all the other areas in the oil rigs and things where they had expats working there. They had a separate compound for American or Westerners with normal things, like I shouldn't say normal things, Western things in the shops. That what I mean is like, you know, there's no pork in that country, there's no bacon, there's no sausages, there's none of that. But in these compounds, in the American compounds, they had all that. But with our project, they decided, let's do a social experiment here and mix the communities of Arabs and Westerners. It had never been done before. And didn't work. It didn't work. It was a disaster because basically what they were doing was we were living side by side with each other, but there was no compromise on the culture. We had to follow their culture.
Because you were in their country.
We were in their country. I'm not saying it doesn't make
no,
sense.
I know. Yeah.
But it didn't work because we were schooled differently. So we had an American school and an international school, but it ran on the American system. And then they had their schools, which were single-sex schools. And so the kids didn't mix. So then we just didn't understand each other. And we Western kids just went wild, basically. Wild. Like so they only had classes up to 9th grade, which you're about 14 then, right? So and they kind of said that, like, this is where a load of people must sat around a table and said, let's do this. And then when they're 14, we'll send them off to boarding school, right? So the company had agreed to anybody that had a child over 14, they would pay for the boarding school and all that, right? So that's, and they did that so they didn't have sort of older teenagers there that could be getting into trouble and influencing the Arabs. But I think they underestimated us, like 10 to 14-year-olds.
Young. Yeah. And
We were.
how did that work? How did that turn out?
So basically, I mean, like there's no alcohol in the country, right? So of course my parents didn't care. They didn't drink alcohol, but all my friends' parents brewed their own wine or beer. So everybody brought a bottle out on the weekends, and we just, from about age 12, we were drinking. And then I think by third, well, a whole other story happened because I ended up, I don't think I need to go deeply into the
Yeah.
story, but
Yeah.
long story short, I was groomed by a Lebanese man that was living in Saudi Arabia, and he was in his 30s, I think, and he abused me for a year or two. It's all very unclear. So I was sexually abused by him, but like I was like one of the oldest kids around, like, because there were no older teenagers, there was no young adults. After the 14-year-old, the next age group was all of our parents,
Oh my God.
and you wouldn't be there
Yeah.
single, it was
Mm.
just not a
A
normal,
big gap there in that
great
stage
big
of
gap. So
your next
we thought we
development.
were the
Yeah.
big kids. We went off in cars with Arabs, driving through the desert. We did crazy things. I ended up getting addicted to pills. You could go into a chemist and just buy any medication you wanted. So I figured out what you needed to ask for to get speed.
Mm.
So amphetamine. So I got now, in truth, it was my abuser introduced me to that, but I got addicted to it. And it was one of the things he groomed me with to get me, to
Mm.
have a secret, And
Yeah.
um, so I say, it was a disaster. It was a disaster for me. And it was the whole project. After a couple of years after we left, they said, this didn't work, let's change it. But the damage had been done to me and all my friends. Like, we still meet now. We're all in our 50s. We have reunions every year or two. And we're all like, we all suffered from
So
what
fortunate.
happened there. And even the ones that didn't get into the drugs and the drink at such a young age, they moved back to America and just didn't know how to connect with anybody. Like, we didn't get any of the latest music. There was no clothes. There were no clothes shops. Like, there was just material shops like to make clothes. So like, there was no radio. Everything was censored. Everything. Movies were censored. There was nothing. So we weren't in the Western culture when we went home.
Mm.
Nobody could relate to us. Nobody could fit into society, Western society. It was crazy.
At what age were you then? When you say went home, did you go back to
Well,
England?
I didn't go home actually, but other people did. But so when I was 14, I went to boarding school in America.
But your parents, I mean, gosh, oh my God, what even a start to your life. But just when you say the strictness that you grew up with in a Mormon family, and then, to go from that then to a whole other culture, it sounds like you were just, I don't know, part of that childhood of being so restricted and very
And
brainwashed, let's say, or, uncontrolled. Like you can see, you know,
and I think that,
mm,
like, I think really, and so much I've processed as an adult, of course, but looking back on it, it's like I was so restricted in not belonging when I was in England, right? In my young childhood, and an outsider, that I think I just made it my business to be an insider and to be popular, right? Which I was popular because I got all the drugs, all the drink. I was always out. My parents had kind of like, I was the fifth child. I think they just gave up. They didn't have any interest. And I mean, there's another story with that came into my plant medicine process later, but it was like, you know, I think on paper they loved me, but they didn't show it. I didn't know it. I didn't feel it. And so it wasn't you know, I was just felt like I was bringing myself up, you know, from a very young age. I was just on my own. And I remember being about 4 or 5 years old going like, I'm just going to have to deal with this. Like I'm on my own. Like they love my sister way more than me. This was my thing, you know, my childhood thinking.
Of course, yeah.
She's perfect. She never did any drugs. She never did anything wrong. I mean, I didn't think that at 5, but I'm just saying, even at that age, she was the apple of their eye. And she was. And I was like you know, just a little bit, they were disappointed in me. This was the thing all my life, because I wasn't as good as her. You know, a lot of people went through that kind of
I
trauma
know,
with
but
their
it's not
siblings.
easy. I know we all have that, but it's like when you think back to a child, really, the experiences that many people are still here and alive and functioning, considering,
Yes,
you know, and
the
it's
the
coming out
the start,
more.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So
such.
I think I did anything I could to belong when I got to Saudi Arabia, and I was class president. I was, you know, like just turned into a party animal at 12, you know. We snuck out every night. It was a very safe environment, right? Because there was security everywhere. They would be driving around 24/7. It was a it was a high security place, but and they didn't send us home. Like, I mean, we'd hide anyway, but you know, but like I was sneaking out every night for like when I was 13, 14, every night, and got in lots of trouble. Lots of trouble. Like there's a few other stories there that I won't bother going
Yeah,
into.
but a lot of trauma. And you know what
But
strikes me, and
the
it's
trouble was more trauma as well, you know, of course.
yeah, of
I felt like a bad
course.
kid. I just felt like a bad kid.
So it was like, well, if that's what they think of me, well, I'm just gonna live up to
Where's
that.
the
Why
line?
not?
I may as well do it all.
That's the
And
incentive.
and I
Yeah.
think that also had an effect with the Mormon thing with so Mormons don't swear, they don't date before they're 16, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't drink tea and coffee, they don't, you know, they don't do any of these things. So if I smoked, which I did from like 11 cigarettes, right? Which was probably my rebellion against the religion and all that. So because I smoked, my parents like made a massive deal about that. So I may as well do it all. Like that was my thing. I was like,
Mm.
well, you're already disappointed in me just because I've smoked a cigarette. So where's the cocaine? You know, sort of thing.
Okay, so it
Like
really went like from
I just didn't see
yeah.
any reason to not do anything anymore
Mm.
because they were already thinking I was bad and the black sheep and like this disappointment thing. Oh, what a wound that was, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
you can imagine, you know, we all have the different wounds from childhood, but the
Yeah.
pain of just not, you know, being enough. You can just see how being so hurt, you just would go,
Yeah.
you know, that's from that wounded place. The child would
So
just
it's
go,
like
well,
I didn't feel loved. I didn't think I feel
yeah,
I was good
yeah.
enough because I was always a
Mm.
disappointment. And they never gave me a time to come in. They never told me when dinner was. They didn't, you know, I was just wild and free.
But you went from the strict to the wild and free. That's what's so
But the
interesting.
thing, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned later on, those are the three core wounds of the three core mother wounds.
Tell me them.
I
Yep.
don't, so
Yeah.
one is I'm not worthy, like I'm
Mm.
not good enough. Um, another one is I don't exist, like I'm not really that important.
Mhm.
I mean, not existing is the extreme, but it's that idea
Yes.
that like I knew that all my friends had time to come in, but I didn't because my parents didn't care when I came in.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wasn't important. They were living their life now. They're two of them, you know? And the other core wound is that I'm not able to do anything. I can't.
Okay.
So
Come across that
I
one.
didn't
Right.
really
Mm.
delve into that one, right? But
Mm.
there was a time, obviously in my teenage years, just like self-loathing, suicidal at 12, 13, and just wanted to dull everything out with this drugs. I took any pills. If it killed me, I kind of thought that's okay. I was really like messed up at a very young age. So this was all in Saudi Arabia.
So this was all in Saudi Arabia. So when then did you leave Saudi Arabia? Where from there? You went to the States, is it?
So I went to the States, yeah. And basically I was given, so the company at this point was going to pay for the boarding school. I was given a book, a boarding schools in America, and I could choose wherever I wanted to go, which again, as I say, was an amazing privilege to have, right? And so I chose a girls' school because I needed to be away from men because the abuse was happening towards just before me leaving, more so, right? And so I knew I needed to get away from men. And so I chose a girls' school. I liked horses, so I chose one with horses. And I had a friend that was in Saudi Arabia with me, but she was moving back to Washington, D.C. Her mother didn't want her going to boarding school, so she moved back, right, to the States. And so I said, well, I'll go near there. So I was about an hour away from DC. And so at 14, I went over like actually a month early on my own. My parents didn't bring me across the world, which I still can't get my head around, right? They just packed me up, sent me off. Stayed for a month early. Well, stayed for a
And do you
month
think
with
they
my,
knew, sorry, Rebecca, do you think they knew, did they know about the abuse and what was going on?
they didn't know about the abuse at that point. Actually, I don't know if they ever knew. It was a bit like this was a man that was living in our house, and I've no idea to this day why he was living there. I know why he set it up to live there now as an adult, but I
Mm.
don't know. My parents are both passed away. I have no idea why he was there.
Yeah, that's
But I do know that at some point before I went to boarding school, my dad kicked him out. I don't know why either. So
okay.
look, I
Yeah,
just
I
didn't,
know. Yeah.
because what happened then was I got on the plane to go to the States. It was an 11-hour plane ride. And I'd always kept a journal. Oh, this was actually part of the training from the Mormon church was about journaling and everything. So I'd always kept a diary and written things out and figured out what was going on by doing that. Used it as my therapy, I suppose. So sat on the plane, wrote down all these things that I hated about myself and that I'd done, all the things that I thought were bad and, all the things. And cried for the whole journey. Don't even remember any stewardess coming over or anything, but crying the whole journey. And I decided, right. So the thing was that when I was in Saudi Arabia, I was called Becky. That was my name from when I got there, Becky. So I sat on the plane and said, Becky's dead. That's over now. I'm not being Becky anymore. I'm going to be Rebecca from now on. And Rebecca doesn't do this and she doesn't do that. And, like I was like, had an awakening on the plane. I remember it. I remember doing it,
Wow.
but I also realized years later that during that process, I pushed all that stuff down and said, that didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I just denied all of it and completely forgot most of it.
But it was probably survival too,
It was just, I forgot about the
Yeah.
abuse.
Yeah.
I forgot about it. And I remember all my life after that having these little inklings of things that had happened between me and this man and thinking that was odd. But the memory didn't come back. Even though I was
I've heard that before though from other people saying it's obviously in a compartment where, yeah, I can't deal with this, but
trained.
it's just physical survival and
Yeah.
So you literally, yeah, that was just pushed,
So I
happened. I
just
can
got there.
remember.
Now, the thing about it was that I I don't know if I said I was never doing drugs again, but I wasn't doing those particular ones.
I'll be a bit more selective. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Because actually what happened was, and I can see now that it was the beginning of my healing journey, was that shortly after I got to America, I was given magic mushrooms. And now I just thought they were drugs, and they were to get off my face. But now I realize, like, you can't take magic mushrooms without healing. Like, they are just pure healing. They are amazing. So I can talk about that later, but this
yeah,
it's very interesting that very shortly before I even got to boarding school, I had magic mushrooms. Then I went to a Grateful Dead concert. I don't know if you've heard about the Grateful Dead at all, but in America, everybody knows who the
yeah, I've
Grateful
heard of them. They're heavy metal,
and
aren't they?
and
They're,
so I took my first acid trip at a Grateful Dead concert because everybody at the
this was reformed, Rebecca.
this is reformed Rebecca, right? But this is healing, right? Remember, this is the theme now. The healing has
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
begun.
know it's very interesting.
No,
It's a certain, I,
I did say I was reformed in um I just was starting a new identity.
yeah. Oh no, and I say I
Um,
don't mean that lightly
I
because
know, me
obviously there
neither.
was a
Yeah.
survival mode of you
Yes.
can see how intelligent the body is,
Yeah.
that we cannot deal with this now. It's too much. So
Now, as well, for this month that I'd gone before school, I was staying with my friend that I'd been in Saudi Arabia with. So I did bring some of me there, but when I was in boarding school, where she didn't go, I was Rebecca then, and never mentioned the fact that I'd ever been called Becky. I just told people I didn't like being called Becky. And
mm,
I mean, when I say I didn't like it, I used to go, oh, like that. If somebody had just started calling me
mm,
Becky, and that was my body saying,
of
oh, I
course, yeah,
remember, you
yeah.
know,
But everything else that goes with that would come up then,
would
I
come up. So I
imagine.
wasn't ready.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
just
yeah,
go, no, I'm Rebecca. And
yeah.
like, yeah, had a great childhood. Yeah, lived in Saudi Arabia, traveled the world. It's been great, you know. And anyway, so look, went
Yeah,
through boarding school. That's a whole other
yeah.
long story.
Yeah. But where we'll
But
go, yeah, yeah, sorry, continue. No, but that's very interesting. And I'm sure people listening, particularly who have been through abuse or maybe something else traumatic, I'm sure maybe have faced something similar where that is shut down for your survival. So, I think I know it's not easy, but it's very not valuable, but for others to hear this, because I think we're living at a time where more and more of these stories are coming to the surface, more than in so many people I'm meeting, and that the dignity, and I've heard that word is, restored to people who have been through something so traumatic and horrific that, so thank you for sharing that, because that I know you're in a different place now, but it's still,
yeah,
that
and
is
it's
still for,
important to note that,
yeah,
it's not
for
that
them brush over.
everybody
It's
can just talk about it as if, like, for me, it's as if now it's happened to somebody else, not because I'm suppressing it, but because I've delved into it and I've come to terms with it through my work with plant medicine and the support of plant medicine, which, you
yeah.
know,
We can
uh,
move into, but isn't it very interesting? Every woman nearly that I speak to on this podcast, when you look at it, you can nearly trace back. I talk a lot about being a student of astrology, which I love, and how empowering it has been to really understand what I feel is what I decided to sort of come in and work with in this life and maybe transcend and heal and grow from. And everybody nearly who tells their childhood story, you could say, now maybe they see it differently. Oh, okay, I can see how the ground was being laid and what was being here.
mhm,
It's sort of, you're
yeah,
into initiations, really, aren't you? And
yeah, it's amazing.
it's amazing when you can. So somebody may be listening to this and be in the middle of something horrific or traumatic, but I think the more we talk about this, that we start to see life in a new way, I suppose. When you're out the other end and you've done your healing work, you can start to take the bigger, can't you? I know in my own life, you can sort of zoom out a bit, and this is jumping.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
mean, I would say I would see the purpose in it now.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So yeah,
It's more than acceptance.
yeah, yeah.
It's something that I had to go through in order to learn the lessons that I needed to learn in this life.
That's a big one though, and not saying
It,
everybody, I suppose
no, no,
everybody's
it's
different, and
like,
I
but like,
know, but yeah,
I don't think everybody has to learn that lesson
yeah, okay,
in this particular life,
yes.
you know?
Mm.
Maybe we all need to learn that lesson at some point. And I'd imagine a lot of us, if we're going back to our ancestral roots, like it was more common, for women to be treated that way and to feel powerless and abused, that so
So do
uh,
you feel you were definitely born for these times, like that you sort of chose specific?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I think I came in going, give it to me. Just give it to me. I
Mm.
can take it all and I can heal it all when I find what it is I'm looking for.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just very like, I suppose looking back, I can see the resilience that was there. But it was almost like I saw it at the time as a rebellion. That it was rebelling against the Mormon religion. It was rebelling against my parents. And it wasn't serving me
Mm.
at the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
But look,
Yeah.
I
But when
didn't
did
have anybody. I was managing my own self.
so where to after school and college then? Like, so you obviously, I know rather than, because I think it's very, because it's important, really, I'd like to get to the plant medicine part of
Yes,
what you
yeah.
do. So maybe you share, there's obviously key turning points in all of this when different things happened, because I know you went on to get married. And would there be, where would you go next to say a particular moment or turning point or something that started a shift in yeah how you view.
Well, I would say actually, it was actually my husband. When I met him, he started talking to me about spirituality. And I kind of hadn't ever looked at anything else. I just knew that I wasn't feeling aligned with the Mormon church. At this point, I was in university, Brigham Young University, which is a Mormon university. So it was me
Okay, you
and
were still in
27,000.
that world in a way, yeah.
Oh, much more in it at this point, in college, because everybody was Mormon. So I was really fully immersed in the whole thing, and then realized it really doesn't resonate with me. And that was that, right? So I escaped really. I was 19 when I met my husband, or met this guy, and he asked me to marry him 2 weeks later, and I said yes. And I see now I just needed to get out of that environment, and I had nowhere to go. I had no home. My parents were still in Saudi Arabia. They loved it over there, living their best life. And I didn't have anywhere to go. So I ended up moving back to England. He lived in England at the time. I moved back to England. Anyway, there was this spiritualist church, which is still there now. But I was, so we went to the spiritualist church, and it basically, they have a medium come every Sunday.
This is very common in England though, I know, because
Yeah,
it's
so we'd
yeah,
have a
yeah,
little
very.
sing song, we'd have a prayer, we'd have a sing song, and then a medium would come and give us all these messages. And there's only like 20 or 30 of us there, and every week there was a different medium. So you'd get a message every couple of months, It was amazing. I loved it.
Mm.
And oh boy, did it open up my mind. Now I'd had my mind opened a little bit with the mushrooms and the acid, which is why I mentioned them earlier on, right?
Okay.
There was a purpose in it. I wasn't just going
Yes.
on
No,
that.
no, I know. Yeah, you maybe yeah.
But uh, but anyway, so
Yeah,
sorry,
so you were yeah, no, we were just
where was
moving. Yeah. How you met your husband and sort of came out of the Mormon church into this.
so then I started reading. So I was on the search. So that's what the reason I mentioned that is it's like, oh, these things are coming true. Then had a psychic artist come, and he drew my husband's uncle that was in England. And it was all these things that were just like, this is true. Now, in one of the messages I got was, I see 2 rings here, which tells me that your marriage is not going to last forever. And I'm like, we were married about a year, I was like, oh,
Age
oh,
20.
I'll just shelf that, but it turned out to be true anyway, and couldn't have been any other way. It's not as if that message had any influence. But anyway, so I started reading, and I read a book. I was reading some Carlos Castaneda books. So I was about 21 at this point. And Carlos Castaneda was taking peyote, which is a plant medicine. And he was describing the experience that he'd had and the teachings of Don Juan. It's really like, there's a series of books. I loved them all. So I was like, oh, wow, there's another state of consciousness. I need to experience this. I know I'm going to do this one day. And I also knew, and actually it was a message I got during one of the mediums at the spiritualist church. He said, you're going to be needed for the next 20 years or so, like, in your family, to do your family things and all that. But after that, after you're done, spirit will be needing you. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, oh, great. When you're 21, you're like, excellent. So anyway, so I started reading these, and so all the time I was reading about these things, I was thinking, well, I need to I would think I don't know, I wasn't pregnant at that time. Anyway, whatever. I just thought, well, this is not now. I know it's later on I'm going to be doing this stuff. I just knew, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but the seed was planted with the Carlos Castaneda books.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah.
And so I'm going to fast forward to got divorced. No, had 3 children, got divorced. But so that was 15 years in that time, right? Nearly about 13, I think it was 32 when I actually got divorced. And so that 13 years was spent in real, what I would call poverty, like not enough money to feed the children. My husband wouldn't go out and get a job. I went out and got a job in a chip shop so that I could just bring in a bit of cash. I think £12 a night I used to get from 7 p.m. till like 2 a.m. And we still really didn't have any money. We didn't have a car. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have anything, nothing. And like meat, we could afford meat maybe 2 days a week, and like that type of thing, really feeling I couldn't afford disposable nappies for my second baby. I had to use the cloth ones because there's just no way we could stretch it, so.
And your family weren't anywhere in the scene, like you'd brothers and sisters, or your sisters, like there was no.
My sister did help me out now and again because we regularly got the electricity cut off. So if we were either threatened or we got the electricity cut off, I used to have to go down to the phone box, ring my sister. She was in France and she had a good job. She's doing okay. So she would always send me money if I was no electricity. If I was really stuck. I mean, I don't think I asked too often, but
yeah,
I think over 10 years it added up to about £1,000, which I did end up paying her back at one point. But my parents, like, I didn't marry a Mormon, so I had laid my bed, made my bed, I had to lie in it. Like at one point when I wanted to leave my husband, and they were living in England, they did move back after we got married, and so they were in England, I was in Ireland at the time, and I said, like, I really need to get out of this marriage. I had 2 children. Can I come over? And they had a caravan in their garden. I'm like, I could live there, go to college, I'll do this, do that. No, you made your decision. Best place for those children is with you and their dad.
Oh, wow. God, on your own again. It's like this pattern in your life, really, isn't it? Like you're here on your own.
And there was a few more that I haven't even.
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't talk all night. The podcast would be too long.
Yeah.
So anyway, so where was I? getting
So you
divorced.
moved on. Sorry, I was going to say, yeah. So, God, I was just looking at each of the chapters that are leading you to where you are. So your marriage broke down. I know you've talked about then how you ended up, I suppose freeing yourself financially and becoming independent through. So that built that, you have three
Yeah.
businesses.
So we can skip
Yeah.
over that really, but
Yeah.
basically for the next 20 years, or maybe about 16 years it probably took for me to actually start getting some regular income. But I built up a childcare business, and then I used some money from that to open a shop, and now I have three
Yeah.
childcare businesses and two shops in Waterford, which I can't actually believe I'm going to say this, because I still can't believe it's like I'm making it up, but um like my two daughters are running my childcare business, and they asked me to leave last year.
Yeah.
My face, how sad I am.
I know. If you're listening and not watching, she does look miserable. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, they might watch this, but yeah,
I know. Mm.
they just can do it better without me. I was in and out, in fairness, I was in and out of the plant medicine, and they were just like,
Mm.
do you know what? Can you just go and do your plant medicine? We've got this. And I have an income from it still. So they weren't like cutting off anything from me. They were actually just giving me my freedom.
Mm.
And the shops my son-in-law is running, and he doesn't want me to do anything to,
Yeah.
run them.
Yeah.
So
So the freedom that's coming from, the life that you talked about.
way bigger than I had ever dreamt. Like it's way bigger than I'd ever dreamt. It's so much
Like just
better.
some questions on that then. So firstly, just around the childcare business, do you think was the reason particularly around that based on your own childhood? Do you think consciously or unconsciously why you chose that?
Well, when I was in college, in university, I studied primary education and special education.
Mm.
And so I always wanted to actually work with children with special needs. Um, but I left college like just before finishing my 2 degrees. Like I had one semester left or something. It was crazy. But I left and didn't uh, complete the thing. And in fact, I did have enough credits for the degree, right? Just didn't follow it through. But when I came to Ireland, I couldn't teach because I didn't have Irish.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. To be honest.
So I didn't even consider, oh, I'll go learn Irish. That just wasn't in my thinking. So I just said, well, I better do something else then. And then it's a bit of a long story, but I gradually got involved in childcare, and I volunteered on a community project and ended up getting all the training I needed and all the knowledge I needed. And which actually it is a big point that I did a lot of voluntary work. And when after leaving my husband, I believe the reason I'm successful is because I did work hard, but before that I did a lot of voluntary work and charity work. And I honestly believe that I got so many gifts from that I wasn't expecting, that
Mm.
I honestly think that's why I became successful, because I wasn't expecting anything. Anyway.
So was there any sign of any of the trauma that you had been through, Rebecca, surfacing during your marriage?
Not really. I mean, I didn't put any of my stress down to that, but we could say like I was living on the edge of my nerves all the time, really just felt this huge responsibility. I was bringing up three daughters on my own, and knew that I needed to get myself. I didn't want them to think that because I'd married the wrong guy, it meant that we were always going to be in poverty. I wanted, like, that was my thing. I needed to prove to them that no matter what happens, you can get up and succeed in whatever you want. So that was my driving force. But because of this driving force, I was like running around, proving it to myself, proving it to them, like,
It
just
sounds like a
going out
full on, yeah,
full
that
on,
sounds you were
full
in.
on. But I kind of thrive on that as well, I
Maybe
realize.
you've some Aries in your chart. I seem to ask that a lot of women recently.
I have no idea. I'm not.
I
Yeah,
lied. I'll leave
yeah.
out the astrology.
You can
So,
teach me.
yeah.
Um,
So you eventually got to tell. Can you tell us then? Well, let's move
so
on
then,
to getting to medicine.
it was actually another book. Like I've always read books, um, as consistently as I could make time for, and so I read this book called the Shaman in Stilettos, and it was about this woman from London, like this kind of high society woman in London that went to Peru and did ayahuasca. And I mean, it was a bit of a romantic story. She fell in love with the shaman and they were meant to be together, and all this stuff happened. And she ended up moving to Spain and opening her own retreats and all this. But the thing about that got me about the book when she was describing the process of the ayahuasca, and I was just like, oh, yes, this is like, I'm remembering back to the Carlos Castaneda books like 20 years before, going, which I still had on my shelf. Like I'd always valued these books and knew that they were special. And anyway, so I said, right, I'm going to Peru. And it was a few years before I was to turn, I must have been about 47 or something like that. And I said, right, for my 50th, I'm going to save up and I'm going to Peru. So that was my plan. I'd already made my decision that I was going to do the medicine, because I'd already made the decision at 21 when I'd read the first books about peyote. So so then it was actually about probably less than a year before my 50th, and a friend said to me, have you ever heard of ayahuasca, Rebecca? I said, yeah, I'm going to Peru to do it. And he says, well, you can do it in Ireland, you know. I went, what? Well, I couldn't believe it. So went online. 2 weeks later, I was at a retreat.
Wow. You don't waste time.
No. And, there were a lot of very interesting things about the timing, because I probably was only just starting to make a bit of money from my business. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have had the 3 years before that. I didn't have the money to go to Peru. I didn't have the money, but now at this point, it was becoming a real possibility that I could go to Peru, but also it meant that I had the possibility to just go, yeah, I'm going to the retreat, regardless of the cost. So yeah,
Possibility comes when you're ready, doesn't it? Like it's
this
often
is
you can
it,
think, I've
you
had
know,
that too. You go, oh, if I only had the money to do that course, but it's obviously not the time, and maybe there's more stuff in,
to be done before you do the course. And when the course is ready for you, you'll have the money. And like that's happened to me just over and over again. I mean, I could talk about the
you
business
could
side of things.
trust
Like
trust the
I
divine
always
design.
trusted. I never knew how the money was going to come, and I always trusted, and it never let me down.
Mm.
Never. I
We're always
don't know
given
how
what
it
we're needed, even though I know I often fight against that, but I do know in the end
right.
it is the
I
truth.
mean, for me, I had one employee to start off with, so that was all I needed, was to pay that employee every week. She was relying on that money. So I never not paid her. It got there. But anyway.
So you go
So
to Peru.
so back to the plant medicine. Really,
Mm.
I mean, the first retreat, I just felt like I've been waiting all my life for this. I just felt so like I can really find who I am. I wasn't going to the retreat thinking I've got all this trauma that I need to sort out. I was going to the retreat thinking I've been on this spiritual search since I went to boarding school. I started reading about
Mm.
Buddhism and
Mm.
stuff. And I found it. It's me. I don't know if I was there after the first retreat, but I remember
So
like,
talk us through maybe what happens, because I don't know anything really about
right,
plant
okay.
medicine,
So
and for listeners.
basically, what happened was on my first retreat, I went, it was in Longford. I just couldn't believe that it was in Ireland. Like that was the most exciting thing for me, because
Yeah,
it was so
I never knew
impressive.
that.
Yeah. And so I didn't have a clue. Like I didn't speak to anybody before going, which I would never bring anyone to my retreat without speaking to them first. You know what I mean? It's important. I didn't have a clue what I was going to. And anyway, to cut a long story short, you go into the room. There was about 20 of us in the room, and they gave us this cup of ayahuasca, just like that much.
Known as Mother Ayahuasca, is it? Is that what I often hear that, or is that
Yes,
all
yeah,
you talk about?
it's a definitely a feminine energy that you
Okay.
get from the medicine, a loving, motherly, caring, loving medicine, you know, because there's others that are not like that. But
Yeah, we might
ayahuasca
talk
is.
about some of them. I'd love to,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so Mother Ayahuasca, yeah, maybe.
So so they just said to me, there's a bucket. Sorry, it's a motorbike up these tiny village streets in France. There's a bucket, so you might purge. If you do, just go and rinse out your bucket in the bathroom and that. So I lay there, and they kept saying, and you just need to surrender and let go. So I lay there going, let go, let go, let go, let go. I didn't have a clue what to do. Then at one point, I vomited into the bucket, and I thought, here we go, like this is all happening. And actually, so I thought, right, I need to get the bucket over. So I did bring the bucket over to the bathroom, rinsed it out, came back, and thought, right, now this is going to start. I'll lie down. And fell asleep. So my first ayahuasca, like I
Wow,
see,
I've never.
it's important that I say this because it happens a lot to people,
Okay.
or not just the going to sleep, or they may just lay there and be thinking, let go, let go, let go, let go, and it doesn't happen because your mind is so strong. And I definitely had a very strong mind. I was so focused on the reality of life and money and children and this and that and all the things I had to deal with. So my mind was too active to even allow me to let the ayahuasca in.
So that's how
So
powerful, though, the mind is that you were able to keep that. And I suppose that, well, there's free will and all of this, I imagine. So, but
yeah,
still, that you can. So,
yeah,
so what happens then? Like, you're obviously there for a few days. Like, can this be a
yeah.
full retreat for someone that very little
Yep,
happens?
it can be. Yeah.
Okay.
For me, luckily, it wasn't. The next night, I did go into the process and
Can you
start
describe the process?
have
What
a
would
little
that
bit.
be?
So it's very difficult to explain because, for one thing, I don't really know if what I experience is what anybody else has experienced because I'm not in their head. I'm
Mm,
not in their
mm,
body. I don't know
mm.
if it's
But
the
for you,
same.
even
Very
like,
difficult to put words into it, but like you just really feel like, say, your awareness of the outside world just sort of gets smaller and smaller and smaller, as if like there isn't anything else. My thoughts are not going to like, I wonder what the traffic's like outside, or where the cat is, or any of those sorts of thoughts outside of yourself. So you just gradually go, your thoughts just come inside to you.
mm,
And it's like you kind of have this ultra awareness of yourself. And then some people see visions. Maybe they might see, a picture, a vision of their father or their grandfather, or, a special friend or an aunt, or people that have passed, people that are alive. It doesn't make any difference. Like you can be shown whatever it is that you need to be shown. On my first night, it was actually, there had been a big falling out in my sibling family. None of them were speaking to me. I wasn't speaking to any of them, alone again. And ayahuasca, the only thing I saw, and I don't know if somebody said it to me or if I thought it, it's all very like, when you're in that, you know what's going on. But when you come out, it's very difficult to go, what was it exactly? What's that exactly? I mean, I can't understand. Some people come out and go, oh, I saw this dragon and it came and did this. And and ISIS told me to do this and all these kind of things. And
We were talking about a
I'm
certain
like, how
person.
do they remember these things? Like for me, I was just there and it happened, and then I went to the next thing. But anyway, so the message that I got, the one message I got that night was, here's all your trauma, which by the way, I didn't think I had any. Here's all your trauma, and here's your siblings, the issue with your siblings, that you're not speaking to your siblings. And it was a hand and another hand like this that I was seeing. And it said, until you sort this out, you're never going to be able to get to this. So you need to go and sort it out with your siblings. And I was a bit devastated, because I'd gone through a whole process thinking that it was okay that my siblings didn't speak to me and I was fine about it, right? But obviously I wasn't. Otherwise, ayahuasca would not have come, or my higher self, as I would prefer to, as I've
Okay.
come to understand it, that
Okay.
it was my higher self saying, stop pretending this doesn't matter. Like, of course it matters that your siblings have rejected you and now you don't belong all over again,
Yes.
So I had to go on a deep dive into what had happened with my siblings and why we weren't talking. Went through a deep dive on forgiveness, judgment, all the things that,
Is this all happening in the retreat, or
no,
is
sorry.
this was
This
separate?
was
So,
for the following 6 months.
okay. So can I just ask, so Mother Ayahuasca, this plant with this, let's say, would you describe each plant has a particular quality, or how would you describe it, or a particular message or tone? How do you differentiate, like what would you say
Yeah.
Mother Ayahuasca's role is?
Okay. So maybe we step away from the story now, because we
Yes.
got me to where we're at the plant
Yes.
medicine, right?
Yeah.
But so ayahuasca is a gentle, loving plant or energy that can show you what's blocking you from reaching your potential. So it could be your potential in a relationship, it could be your potential in a job, it could be your potential anywhere at all in your life. But we generally have blockages. Oh, I mean, we all have blockages. Otherwise, we'd all be, multi-billionaire, successful, whatever it is we dream we want to be, which we're all on our way there. But so it, we all have something that's blocking us. There's always further to go, even if we are amazingly successful or whatever it is that we think we're arrived where we want to be. So so many times those blockages are a result of trauma, a result of a traumatic experience that has left a residue of trauma in your body, whether you remember it or not. Your body does remember it. And so it can show you those. It can show you visions, or just bring thoughts into your mind about those things that are blocking you. And then you're in that sort of wide open state where you kind of go, oh, right, now I see, it might just need to be shown to you, the topic. And then you're like, oh, and sort of your own higher self, your own thoughts are processing this and going, oh, now I see why I did that, and why that's blocking me now, or how that came. So that's ayahuasca. And then there's San Pedro. So my retreats, I do ayahuasca on the first 2 nights. So 2 nights, because very often on the first night, people don't know how to surrender to the medicine. And so it's like, and if they do, it's usually just a gentle introduction. Very rarely do people go really in deep on their first time, because you're not ready for it. Your higher self manages it, never gives you more than you can handle. With
Well,
all
that's
the
an important
medicines,
thing for people to
it's
know, isn't it?
it's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you can say your higher self, you could say the medicine. It's the same thing to me. So the medicine will never give you anything that you can't handle. Never. I've never seen it. And I've been sharing medicine with hundreds of people over the last 8 years. And it will never give you more than you can handle. And it'll only give you what you can handle, which is saying the same thing. but it's reassuring to know that
Yes.
it will only give me what I can handle.
Yeah. And
And
it sounds
if I
like the
think
next layer, sorry,
yeah,
like you described with the siblings or whatever. So we're always with layers. That's my experience. So it's going to bring you, it's
yeah,
hardly going to dive down to the
it's
deepest
not gonna,
layer.
yeah.
Yeah. Unless, yeah.
So maybe the journey, maybe the point was that the journey through forgiveness and judgment and all of that sort of stuff with my siblings is what allowed me to open up the rest, you know. So
The new
so
San Pedro, you said, the
so
mother.
San Pedro,
Yeah.
so San Pedro is like the peyote. So this is what I was searching for all the years, right? Was this experience with San Pedro, which is like love. It's just love. You feel like every cell in your bones, every cell in your body
Mm,
is just love. And
mm,
for people that are disconnected from their feelings and emotions, which most of us are, this is a new feeling. You know, it's not a romantic sexual
mm,
love. It's
mm. Who you
pure,
are. Mm,
unconditional, I am love. You know, it's that recognition. So San Pedro is described, the energy of San Pedro is described like a grandfather, where he's teaching you, he's stern but loving. So there may be, so the process of San Pedro can last 10 to 12 hours.
yeah.
And so it's a long time for you to keep on like realizing things and processing things. And it keeps, the process with San Pedro keeps you in the moment. So you can't think about 5 minutes ago, you've forgotten it. And you have no interest in thinking about the future. So that's the teaching, right? This is what can happen if you're in the moment, you're staying in the moment, you're not distracted by the past or the future. You're just here in the now. This is how we should be living, which is what I have learned from San Pedro. My biggest teacher was San Pedro. And that was the biggest lesson for me and how I'm living my life. Because,
So it sounds like it could be quite a, whoa, a ride in that if you're in the moment and processing. So that means you're moving, you could be moving through things very quickly. Could you, in
yes,
terms of, so it's
yeah,
like, whoa, you could have a big purge. Okay,
absolutely. And then
another
the next
wave. Is
thing
that?
you're laughing your head off, like
Mm,
harder than you've ever laughed in your life. You think you can, you think this is the most laughter you've ever done in your life. And then maybe 10 minutes later, you could be crying at the deepest level that you've ever
yeah,
thought you could.
yeah. Which is how
And
we're meant to live, I feel, with that sort of
it's being
laughing,
in the
crying,
moment and
moving,
allowing the
moving.
emotions to flow.
Mm, mm,
So the reason that we don't live like that is because we might be out in the middle of the street or in the shopping mall, and as as happy thought comes, we can't stand there and laugh our heads off in public
Maybe we will
without,
in the
yeah,
future.
I can, to be
I
fair.
know. Yeah,
But
I think more of us.
but
Yeah.
generally, society has told us that we can't. It's not acceptable. Like, that's crazy. They'll lock you up. Hide your laughter, hide your happiness. Don't be feeling those emotions. And I mean, I'm choosing happy to start with that conversation, but actually, the truth is that it's the sadness that we're told to block, the sadness that we're not allowed to express in public, in all its glory of the tears and the snot and the dribble and the, tearing our hair out. We're not allowed to do that in the middle of the shopping mall, you know, and,
Sometimes even in at the safety of our homes too.
no,
It depends on people's
exactly,
circumstances. Yeah,
or
blocked
anywhere.
and everywhere.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where my passion for holding retreats comes, because there needs to be a space for them.
Mm,
And there needs to be somebody that's holding that space for them with love, without judgment. The most important thing. If
yeah.
there's one speck of judgment in that room with those people, they will know it and they
Mm,
will feel it, and they
mm,
will not open up, and they won't be able to move on in their lives. So very important.
mm. Okay, Sam.
So,
Yes,
and
that's that.
especially even with that medicine, the San Pedro, you're so in your moment and so in love with yourself and in love with life and in love with nature. Like, it's that real, like, this is the other teaching, is that you are nature. Nature is you. It's not about go out
Mm,
into nature. It's like, you are
yes,
it. Just be it.
yes. That's
Just
been my
being.
biggest teacher. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
all the time, every day, and yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah. And you're right, San Pedro is very much a purging medicine. You wouldn't necessarily vomit.
Okay.
Most people don't, but there's many ways of purging.
Yeah.
So I say this at the beginning of all my retreats because you may recognize then how much you purge in your daily life. So, blinking, twitching,
Mm.
yawning,
Mm.
shaking,
Yes. Like
fidgeting,
an animal would do a bit of a shake off, or
doing all the stuff that we do with our hair, and all that is all purging, burping,
that shedding energy, you're saying, like shedding stuff
all of
all the
it,
time. Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of it. We're doing
Because
it
energy
all
is
the
moving,
time.
I suppose, all
We
the
just
time.
don't
Yeah.
name it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we're regulating ourselves all the time. And so this happens intensely with the medicines because deeper things are coming up. So there may be a bigger, some people could literally be, just like, well, I've done that before. And sometimes like you could feel like your cells are trembling a little bit, and it's all just releasing that energy or that memory out of those cells, right? From the trauma and the past and all the little things that could have happened over the years in our childhood. They're all held there. And at
Yeah.
some point they need to be released, Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's two
That's,
medicines. I also share Cambo.
yes,
So
I've heard of that.
Cambo
Is that like a
is,
tobacco or something? Is it?
no,
No?
Cambo is the frog, the Amazonian tree frog.
Oh, okay. I've heard of it, but
I have
okay.
to show you my tattoo because I got,
You get
oh,
real
wait, do I
education
go?
here.
I got this
Oh,
because it really saved my life. I don't know if you can tell,
I
I'm
can
going
sort of see, but I
backwards.
don't know if I can see. Sort of, yeah, I think at the, oh, yes, I see the two eyes.
So I got that because, well, it's a physical healer. And one of the things I haven't mentioned is that throughout all of this, with all this holding down all this trauma, I had fibromyalgia. So I was diagnosed when I was in boarding school at 16. So I kind of like find it easy to relate to how that came about, because usually fibromyalgia doesn't hit women till adult, at least adulthood, usually 30s.
Okay.
And usually, like at the time when I was diagnosed, they said, oh, this is from, like, if you've been in a car accident, like a trauma. So I only thought of trauma as a physical trauma. So it still didn't say anything to me about what it was. Anyway, but when I first did Cambo, I had, and anybody with fibromyalgia will relate to this, of which there's thousands of people
Yeah.
suffering with it.
Yeah.
And after my first Cambo, I had my first moment of realizing that I was not in any pain whatsoever. And it was the first time I'd ever felt that since I could remember. And I was like blown away that there was no pain,
Emotional pain or
no physical pain. So
physical
I
pain.
was in
Okay.
chronic pain since
Oh,
I was
yes, with the
16,
fibromyalgia. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So after the Cambo, I went, oh, I'm not in any pain. What's this about? So I was like, I need, and it lasted a couple of weeks. The less pain, it did come back, but probably not ever as bad as it was. And so when I did go back to retreats then and continued with Cambo, and well, actually, I just may go back to this story again, because the truth of it is, it wasn't just Cambo that cured my fibromyalgia. I'm not saying that, but I don't have fibromyalgia anymore. But what happened was, after doing a few retreats, all of the trauma came up from the abuse. I saw it. I asked questions. I got answers. I remembered I had a few clues that I knew had been left for me to confirm that this was not just all made up in my head, because you can think that as well.
Mm.
And I don't know, anyway, there were things that I knew had happened. So then I delved into that, and I really, really delved into the trauma, accepting what had happened, although it was so long ago and all this. It was a shock thing. Took me a while, but
Is there support doing that? I'm just thinking of people listening now, and you run retreats and someone
if
going
you
to
come
one.
to my retreats,
Yeah.
yes.
So I can just imagine listening going, yes, great, we can, clear stuff. Something like that comes up. And if you're not in the right environment with the right person who understands and is able to hold this, like that's a huge part. I think that's
Yeah,
where I often hear people go, oh, I don't know about plant medicine. And yes, and be
yeah,
very careful who you go to. So I think it's probably an important thing to talk
yeah.
about as well.
Well,
Yeah.
I can tell you that I did not have the support that I should have had in the organization that I was in. And like I literally went to the Canaries. I went away on holiday to deal with my trauma on my own. And I went into the hotel. I remember getting there and just going into the fetal position and staying there till I was ready to come out of it, you know. And I actually feel emotional now, and I haven't
Me
felt it
too.
in a long
Me
time
too. I see
because
the
I'm
difference.
picturing what I was like there. It was just like I was alone, and I didn't I just dealt with it. Yeah. And I just knew I'd learned enough from ayahuasca at that point to know that I couldn't run away from this anymore. It wasn't going to be something that was going to sort itself out. And if it was like, I was just going to say my mantra that got me through all those years of working hard on my own. If it's to be, it's up to me. It wasn't up
Mm,
to anybody else. If I was going to be healed, it
mm.
wasn't going to be anybody else healing me. I knew that somehow. And I knew that it was my journey that I had to go into this. I mean, at first I was like, is this real? Did this really happen? And then gradually I recognized all the clues and put it all together. And so I remember getting on the plane back to Ireland and realizing that I didn't have any pain in my body from the fibromyalgia. And
Mm.
I am sure that the combination of the Cambo allowing me to believe I could get rid of it, the trauma that was released during that time that I was just focusing on it. I didn't think about anything else, just that, until I could come to terms with it.
And
And
did you go to anyone else to support you after that? So I know you went away. Did you go to a therapist or anything? No.
it was done by then.
Okay. The
If I
energy was
was to
sort of
go to a
cleared, is it?
therapist
Of it?
then, it would have been
Yeah.
like I'd have to tell the story.
Rehashing. I know. Okay. Yeah. The energy of it had sort of
Yeah.
cleared. Is it the
I
trauma
don't even
energy?
know every bit of the story. Like
Yeah.
I remembered what I remembered.
Yeah.
And I don't want I didn't it wasn't about like at first I was like, I need to know everything about this. And then I'm like, no, I don't.
Mm.
It wasn't even me. It
Yeah.
was a 12-year-old girl that thought she was an adult. So I had held all the guilt and shame because I thought I made the decision to sleep with that man.
Mm.
But I was a child. And I think it's important that people that for me was the key. I was judging myself for having got myself in that position, in those
Yeah.
situations, right? As an adult, I was still going, how could she do that? Like, how? Because I was saying, oh, I didn't know it happened. And then it dawned on me, well, I was 12 years old. So I did know. It was
Mm.
crazy, the thought pattern that went through. And then, but eventually, sorry, I'm forgetting now what the point was why I was saying that
Just about in terms of the healing and the story, I get what you're saying that there isn't a necessity. You didn't have a
I
necessity to go back
didn't,
and I don't, yeah, I know, but it was more that once that cleared, that sort
it
of,
was a thing, it was a clearing that I had done. And
yeah.
I don't know, like, how
So
I.
Yeah.
knew what to do or anything.
Yeah, I just wonder, and I just it's more as well for anyone listening who may be considering a plant medicine retreat ceremony going, okay, obviously you hold a very safe space yourself and you've been through all of this. So it's just would many people, so of your experience of running retreats and people coming, would they say to you that whenever something comes up or they go away, there's obviously a whole, I suppose, what would you say, holding or closing for people before they leave, that they are safe, and then it's up to them, is it, if they feel they need to go off and have therapy or not, or whatever, maybe they don't. Or how
Well,
does that roll?
I would like, so first of all, we set up a WhatsApp group for people that have come to the particular group together, the particular retreat together, and they form a bond like that's deeper than any bond you'd ever think anyone could form in a few days. And so through that group, like it's a WhatsApp group that people share their process on. We don't, so I would be offering support there, but it's very important that the person that seeks the help asks for it, right? So I would always say at every retreat, I've always said, I'm available 24/7 for the rest of your life. It's up to you to make the phone call, get in touch with me, and I'll be there. And I
Mm.
am. I don't know how it works. I think the universe just works out that I have the time for it and the energy and all the rest. I have people that call me, they haven't called me for 5 years and they're having a struggle and they know they can call me.
And
Uh,
what would that look like? That I'm not asking you to go into the details of a call, but like, is it, how would that work in terms of someone rings you and says, "Oh my God, all of this is coming up"? So, because obviously you've trained as a facilitator, so is
mhm.
part of that how you hold somebody through it? Like, it's not a
I mean,
therapist.
it kind of
Right.
depends what state they're in and what the issue is. Some of it, like I've worked with, we haven't talked about Iboga, but I've worked with a lot
Mm.
of people with some opiate addictions.
Oh,
And so it may be that they're using again or what have you. So that's a different thing. Or it may be that, so usually I would definitely have a phone call and sometimes Zoom, a video call if it's something that I need to see them, or a visit because if it's somebody nearby. But um I can support them then with microdoses. So I do microdoses of ayahuasca, San Pedro, Iboga,
what
maybe.
did they help you do then, the microdosing?
So the microdosing gives you just a very small amount of the medicine every day. So, and all of those medicines build up in your system. They don't leave every day, So if you take a capsule today, it's not like you're starting fresh tomorrow. You take another capsule the next day, it builds. They stay in your system for 30 to 60 days. So when you're microdosing, like say with San Pedro, you should only need to do it for about 3 weeks. And you have the support of the medicine to keep reminding you maybe what you've learned in your San
Would
Pedro.
you be continuing the process? Could it
Yeah,
be that there's
it
things
was
unfinished?
very powerful for me. Like I microdosed San Pedro and um it really softened my heart, opened my heart for the first time.
Mm.
And it wasn't in the big dose, it was in the microdosing, you know.
Mm.
Ayahuasca microdosing are very helpful in calming anxiety, and I often people when they come to me ready to come off maybe antidepressants with their doctor, and then I support them with the ayahuasca microdosing while they're coming off the
Wow.
antidepressants so
Wow.
that their anxiety doesn't suddenly go high and they can't cope, so they go back on the antidepressants. This
Yeah.
just supports them in a gentle, subtle way so that they can.
Beautiful. Can you talk, just, it's very interesting there. Would you mind, yeah, just for, again, for listeners and for myself to talk about some of the main reasons people, you've mentioned some of them there, might come on a retreat. I hadn't thought of that. So somebody who might be on antidepressants or have an opioid addiction.
Yeah.
What
So
are they?
yeah, Iboga is another medicine that I share separate to the ayahuasca retreats. It's a very different energy, very much a deeper medicine that takes you down into the roots of the cause of your whatever issues that are being shown, but also cleans all the receptors in the brain that cause the addiction, right? So I've worked with a lot of people with addiction with heroin. They could have been using 25 years and one day with Iboga and they don't need heroin anymore. It's a miracle. It's really a miracle medicine. But it doesn't just work with opiates. It works with caffeine. It works with tobacco. It works with cannabis. Works with personality addictions like people pleasing. I mean, it's an amazing medicine.
But are you going back still to because there's always a root to why behavior starts. So,
Yes,
I can imagine with heroin or whatever it is, alcohol,
absolutely. All
I
addiction have a
yeah,
root cause.
yeah. So
All
they all have a
addiction.
root, a
Yeah,
wounding and stuff. So you're going
yeah,
back deep into that really, because you don't,
yeah.
in my experience, anyways, fully heal if you don't get back to the root
Yeah.
cause.
So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, so the medicine cleans the receptors so that you don't physically need the heroin anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But of course you've got like a habit, an emotional habit as well with that's
And pain,
all your life for years
mm,
and all sorts, so the visions that and the process that people go through when they've taken the Iboga are the ones that get to the root to keep them, not needing the
so did they show them? Did you
medicine.
bring you back to maybe what the root,
People
yeah,
have said
whatever.
they've seen a film of their life, but it's not that you're in it. You see yourself in it, but
Mm.
you're not in it feeling the emotion.
Yes,
You're
yes, yeah.
viewing
It's
it
like that
from
timeline therapy.
the
Yeah.
outside so that you can see
Yes.
it from a different perspective and maybe just change your thoughts about yourself,
Yeah.
So people call me because they've got addictions. Also people that have addictions with alcohol and cocaine and pills, they would be often coming and I can support them with the ayahuasca and the
And
other
they might come
medicines.
one, would they? Not, or is it
No, they
actually
come to
always
the
retreat? Is it?
retreats. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's a lot of healing in the group, in
Mm,
having, and being witnessed.
yes. Yeah. I've
Like
experienced that. Yeah, it's very
I
important, isn't
I
it? Yeah.
have done one-on-one retreats and yes, they're powerful, but I don't actually think they're as powerful as the group
Mm,
dynamic.
mm.
We need community. We need
We
others. We
do.
need
We do.
somebody to even compare ourselves to, even not in a judgmental way, but a
Mm,
way of like, oh, we're the same.
mm.
Like we've come from totally different backgrounds,
Yeah.
we've had different experiences, but the result is we're feeling this right now. We feel like we can't go anywhere. We don't know what to do with our lives. We're all feeling the same. So that's the other reason. So that's all there's the addictions and and all of those addictions and habits are results of other things, the root causes. So that's why I can support them in the retreat with the ayahuasca and the San Pedro. And the thing about the retreats is that they're not just about the medicines. There's an awful lot of other stuff going on. There's the
All right.
integrations could last 2 to 3 hours where we discuss things, we
Okay.
talk about things. There's a lot of talking.
Yes.
It's not all about the medicine.
Yes.
There's lots of other parts of it that are also the medicine,
Yeah.
you know?
And yeah, and my experience of being in any group, maybe not plant medicine, is that the group that shows up is the group that's meant to be there, and you're reflecting each other. Even, I was due to go on a shamanic type retreat in France actually, but I couldn't this June. I've had to postpone it. But I sort of knew if I'm not there now, it's because I'm not meant to be there, and the right people show up and the right situations for you. Can I ask you about peyote as well? Could you mention something
Oh,
about
yes.
that?
So I'm going to close this.
Yeah.
It's a bit noisy, the window.
No, I don't hear anything, to be
Oh,
honest, from
good.
this end, but yeah,
That's all right.
feel free.
Sorry, it's just a bit
No,
of
no,
traffic.
sure.
So peyote is actually what I'm talking about when I'm talking about San Pedro. So really what I
All
should be
right.
saying when I'm saying San Pedro, I should say cactus, because
Ah,
there's lots of different types of this strain of cactus that are all psychedelic. It's not just San Pedro. So peyote is a cactus, San Pedro is a cactus, and there's a whole family of cacti that start with Trichoceros, their Latin name. And all of those cacti have this active ingredient, which is mescaline.
yes, I've heard of that.
So
Yeah.
mescaline is the compound that gives the altered state of consciousness, the altered state of awareness. And so yeah, and there's many different doses, many different levels, many different types of all of those cacti that can give, subtle, gentle experiences through to full spectrum experiences.
Wow.
That's what
Okay.
I would
And
call it.
okay, that sounds pretty, sounds full on. And so you're introduced to all of those as you're training, or do you, as a retreat facilitator? You obviously have to have been exposed or experienced and know how to obviously know
Yes.
how to work with them
Yeah.
safely. Um,
So I was in the school for 4 years, and it was like every month we would have a 4-day retreat where we were students learning. And we'd have classes during the day. We'd be supporting in the retreats at night. Like, it was very, very intense. And we'd be volunteering at a retreat in the middle of the month, and we'd have conscious school classes. I used to go to Milan and Madrid for classes, conscious school, it was called, but it's basically talking about topics like truth, like love, judgment, all the, and the things like the mother wounds that I talked about earlier, concepts
yes,
that can be discussed and integrated and understood into people's lives. So we have a night at the retreat where we have a cacao ceremony, and we talk. We have a conscious workshop, and
yes,
it's whatever's come up in the retreat. Anything that anybody hasn't understood about their own process can be brought up. Anything, and that's also important. Like, my retreats used to be like 2 days, then they went to 3 days, then it was like, we can't fit it all in. We need 4 days.
4 days
So
is
we
it?
do
Yeah.
4 nights, and it's not just, I do want to mention it, the medicines are important. It's great to get the knowledge and understanding out there about the support that these medicines can bring, but it's a lot more to it. You're not going to go in, a lot of people maybe misunderstand their messages that they've received, because it's all about the vision. It's all about what I saw and what somebody told me and what happened and how this happened. And actually, that's not where the learning is. The learning is in how it made you feel, how it connected you to your emotions, how it showed you that you're disconnected to your emotions. It's not about the visions. It's about the love. It's about the inner sense of who I am. And I suppose really that's a big message I want to get across, because so many people go onto YouTube and on the platforms, and they show like the most dramatic experiences. They talk about all the visions that they had and all the amazing dragons and jaguars and panthers and snakes. And I'm not saying I've never seen them, but they weren't the message. They weren't it,
Mm. Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
like symbolic
Yes. Yes.
of
Yes.
something.
Yes.
And, and at the end of the day, it's all within your own ability to understand what's going on. It's just sometimes you need to sound it off somebody to let them show you what those symbols were for.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
sounds very important. We were talking about one such person I mentioned before, who, and I think that's with a lot. I suppose it brings me to a question as well. Like I can say, and I know you've said this yourself. Look, if you're called to plant medicine, you're called. If you're not, you're not. It's going to be different at different stages in your life. Like I would have had experiences of purging and altered states of consciousness through other things I did. So I suppose the question then becomes, and for people listening, if you feel that call, like anything in your life, maybe the plant is calling you, and if you don't, you don't. How would you speak to people about it? Because if that comes up, should I go on a retreat or not?
I mean, so generally people will call me through, I don't advertise or anything. They would hear about me through word of mouth. So that's like kind
I
of
know I found it hard to find you
great.
when I couldn't
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
find back the number or the email. I was like, where do I find her? So yeah,
No,
yeah,
you
you're
know
not
me, you
out
know
there.
me.
Yeah.
But uh, so the first question really I ask is, what has made you feel that this right now is the time for you to do the plant medicine? Because it depends on the answer where we go from there, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, sometimes, yeah, maybe this is the medicine for you, but is this the right time for you? I'm not sure. You know, let's discover whether it is. And so that would be my line of questioning. And really, it depends. Very often, I would ask that question, and they could open up and tell me their life story over the next 20 minutes. And I'll know exactly where I'm going after that, you know,
Mm,
depending on
mm,
what it is, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Really, all you need to be is open.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's when they're calling you. There are people that don't feel the calling, and that's okay. You know, very often people go to plant medicine retreats. They're like, I know who would need this. I know who needs it.
It's like a lot of things in life. You go to, oh, I could list a million people who need this,
Yeah,
rather than
yeah.
looking.
And
So
they
it's so
think
much an
everybody
inward.
there in their family and everybody they know is going to come and do this medicine. And they don't, because they haven't had the calling. It is something that's on
Yeah.
a sort of soul level
Yeah.
that you just feel this is what I need to do, you know? And like,
Well, there's obviously a reason, isn't there? Sorry, I know I just interviewed a woman recently who works with a few women, but herbalism and plant spirits, so not necessarily plant medicine in that way, as I that's my understanding, you know. So they'd work with the spirit, but there's obviously certain plants that have hallucinogenic qualities, and the fact that they're in nature and we're nature, they're there for a reason. You know, I never get why people say, oh, it's bad or it's right. If it's in nature, as we are nature, well then it's serving a purpose. There's no
yeah,
accidents in nature. So I suppose it just depends on people's path, would you say, or how
yeah, um, it just depends whether there, some people, I mean, I had somebody come to one retreat and his brother-in-law said, like, come on, I'll pay for you to come to this retreat with me. And I'm there like teaching him how to open up and all that. I mean, he didn't speak his truth when I asked him about did he really want to come. He was like, yeah, you know, but wasn't his truth, right? So he got there and he's like, I'm actually really happy. Like, I've got my life exactly how I want it. I'm really happy with it. Like, he was 70 years old. He doesn't want to change. You know, he didn't want to change.
at 70 he got that far?
Yeah.
Well, you can change at any time, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I've had
at
much
70.
older. I've had much older
Really,
people. Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so I said to him, no, you're right. You need to just continue your life as you are because you're happy. That's the point. I'm not trying
yeah,
to change, you know, I'm not out here trying to like change the whole world because I
yeah,
think it's needs it.
yeah,
Like some people, it's just not where they are in
yeah,
this moment or in this life or
But
whatever.
even looking around us in life, and I can look at my family or other, whatever, I can see the path that I'm on and what is calling me would be of no interest to them in anything I do.
This is
So
it.
that isn't there. And now I've
Yeah.
spent, of course, I have, as we do at the beginning, going, well, yeah, you should do this. And they're quite content. But they, again, it always brings me back to we're each here with our own little blueprint of what we're about. And once you understand that, and I understand that, just stick to my own lane and do me. Well,
Mm.
then, I think all of the judgment that when you talk about judgment, even that we see so much in the world, is part of that again. To me, I don't know how you perceive it. My sense is, particularly when I'm pointing with the finger at anyone, I need to do the work on me. So it feels like there's a world it's just showing us where we're at in terms of our level of consciousness and healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, oh, look, that's a whole, I could,
I
if,
know we won't. I'm not going to go down that because we'll have a very long podcast. The last question I suppose I'll ask you is, okay, you've been on this journey with plant medicine for the last 8 years. What has been the greatest discovery or transformation in your own life? Is there one thing?
um, I finally belong. I
Hmm.
belong. I'm accepted. I love myself. I couldn't
Yeah.
ask for more than that, really, but I
Mm.
have got lots more than that. Lots more. I'm free. I'm not like, I don't have regrets about anything. I understand why everything happened. I don't feel like, self-pity. I would have felt self-pity at times over the years. And now I'm like, no, I'm so lucky. Like, look at the opportunity I've had to sort all this out, and I mean, I'm so grateful. I can't actually believe how my life has turned out. I really can't. And I mean, I'm just so grateful. Like, I also have, so along the way, then I have two people that are supporting me, two women that are supporting me in the retreats. And we call, like, just recently, I've kind of started to relaxing control over my retreats. And I've been training Annie now for like, must be 3 years. And she's amazing and is stepping into her space in the retreats and in all of this. And I have another student who named Ashley, who is also supporting me at the retreats, and it's evolving at every retreat into something amazing. The universe is like, what, a couple of weeks ago we had a retreat, and we had, like, I did not interfere. I never interfere with who comes. I just say, ask them the question about whether it's right for them. If they fits with their schedule, come to the next retreat or wherever you're coming. This last retreat, we had 10 men booked, an all men retreat. And it was magical.
Wow. It's
And it was being
incredible
led
to
by
hear of
3 women,
men.
and
Yeah.
it ended up being 9 men, 3 women. And it was just like a very different learning for me and all of us, because there was different needs, different things, different music, different everything. But they like had an amazing retreat. And
This is
so I just go with the flow. And so, yeah, that's what I've got out of life. I can go with the flow, and I have these wonderful people around me, that I feel like I've finally like just arrived to my life at 56 years old.
oh, that's only a baby. I'm still getting there. We're
So
all on different, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Phenomenal for
So,
someone going from so restricted. That's what struck me from the very beginning, so restricted and in this Mormon
mm,
upbringing and
yeah.
not fitting in to found a place in your life where
Mm.
and we often have to have that contrast, don't we?
But
To
that's the perfection
experience.
of it. That's why I
Yeah.
have no regrets. I know I had to be born into that in order to need to break free.
Yes. Isn't that phenomenal? And I
Yeah.
felt that in my life, in my experience that have been completely different. And every time I look at them, I can see them like that. I forget and I get
Yeah,
triggered, but more often than not, I understand that much. And that is an amazing gift because we are here to be free and to know who we
yeah,
truly are. And
exactly. You know, and for me to be able to, like, I would not have been able to support all these people if I hadn't gone through all those things.
of course,
The
yeah.
addiction, they would have thought I judged them.
Mm,
If I hadn't had it, because I went into cocaine and other things, I had addictions. And so now I say to them, yes, I know exactly what you're going through. And they go, oh, do you? Oh, okay.
mm,
That helps everybody. So I had to go through that. It's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Everything happened for a reason. And
Everything.
it's
Yeah.
still happening for all the reasons, every
Yeah.
moment. And
Yeah.
now I can see it. I didn't see it before.
Yeah, everything does happen for a reason. Even though, yeah, as you said, sometimes when you're in it, you can't. But thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to share at the when this podcast goes out. Rebecca's number will be in the description box, and well, you'll be watching it when you see that. And so, if you want to reach out, if it's calling to you, if you want to connect with Rebecca, find out about her retreats here in Ireland, please do so. And thank you so much, Rebecca, for your time today. We had a few changes of location during it,
I know.
during the internet. So if you notice that, that's what it was about. But thank you so much for that introduction. There may be many listening who are well familiar with plant medicine, others who've never really heard of it. But that's the beauty of just bringing,
Bringing
all of
it out
those.
to the public. And
Yeah,
if
yeah,
anybody just wants more information about plant medicine, you can also just ring me for that. It doesn't have to be for coming
perfect.
to a retreat or anything. I just want to spread the word, spread the
Yeah,
knowledge, spread
yeah.
the
Well, we're living in these times where I
truth.
hope we're all waking up to the truth of who we are and that
Truth.
freedom to be ourselves. I mean, there's no greater gift really in life, isn't there?
No,
So thank you for doing that work. And thank you,
thanks
everybody,
for
for
having me.
listening. Until the next time, take care, everyone. And thank you.